next session, very quickly, will be on the 11th of November, and we're talking all things customer. Just finalising our panel, so we're delighted to announce that Colin Fairweather, the ex-CIO at the City of Melbourne, I think is on the call, will be one of our panellists, as will Daniela Mazzone, who's the Programme Director for Customer Experience and Transformation at the City of Stonington. We'll have one or two more exciting announcements on that as well, so stay tuned. Important to say that these webinars and the Connected Citizen Experience webinar series is based around an assessment model that we've put together. So it's not willy-nilly. The idea is that we, over the course of 7 webinars, we build up and talk about distinct pieces of the digital transformation jigsaw puzzle. So by the end of the 7 months, hopefully you've got a really good idea of what all this is about and some really good takeaways that you can take into your business, your organization. Today is about strategy and leadership. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to John, who's going to introduce Mark.
Thank you, Fergal. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Mark Thompson. Mark is Professor in Digital Economy at the University of Exeter. He's an author, a blogger. He is a former member of the IT Futures Advisor, or he's the former IT Futures Advisor to the UK Cabinet Office. He was on the Digital Advisory Panel to the UK National Audit Office. He's the current Senior Digital Advisor to the Scottish Government, and he's currently on the main board of Tech UK. Mark, amongst his many publications, has co-authored a very good book on digital technology called Digitising Government, which outlined and analysed the experiences of the UK government in adopting digital technology. At this point, it's my pleasure to hand over to Mark himself.
Thank you very much, John, and thanks, Fergal, and thank you everybody for inviting me to speak to you this evening. And greetings from a still slightly dark UK, where it is just gone 7:05 in the morning. As advertised, I'm going to take about 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. I'm going to try and provoke. I don't claim to have all of the answers. I wouldn't do that for a second. If anybody did, you should kick them out screaming from your office, because this is a fast evolving landscape. But I guess I specialise hopefully in asking some of the important questions. So I'm going to give you a lot of opinion. I do have a lot of experience. I'll just summarise it in a second. But actually, in some ways, it does leave me asking more questions than answers. So yes, this is the unit at University of Exeter that I work in, and we're a bunch of people who kind of focus on and obsess about the digital economy, and I in particular focus on and obsess about government. I also co-run 100 million digital transformation group, and there's a data science business and a public services sort of end-to-end transformation group in there as well. That's the data science piece, which has been kind of pretty busy with COVID and providing data to the government. And I publish quite a lot on the sorts of questions we're going to be talking about this evening. So I don't know what time of day it is in the digital world now. So yes, I kind of worry about these sorts of things. So buzzwords like what on earth is government as a platform, and where is it all heading, and what's open architecture? And I'm not a techie. I think about the business implications. So what it is to be a leader in government, and my particular passion is local services, as you're going to find out in a minute. And as John mentioned, I do quite a lot of blogging. I'm a bit of a professional pain in government's arse, I think, when they're not doing things well. And that was a copy of the book. It's now about 5 or 6 years old, but it's done pretty well. Not because we're a genius, but because surprisingly, if you go to most airports, you can't move for all these get-rich-quick digital transformation, top 10 tips books. There's only 2 or 3 books on digitizing government, and that's amazing given that 40% of global GDP goes through government, doesn't it? The other problem, of course, is that I suspect most of you on this call have a lot of transformation ennui, right? Boredom. We are bombarded every day with buzzwords like this. And I'm sure you have people pitching to you and selling to you internally and externally. And we've all got to be innovative and cloud-based and talk about disruption and competitive advantage and all this stuff. Oh, dearie me. And actually, you know, when you're thinking about your strategy, your digital strategy, it's got standardized to the point where you could almost insert those buzzwords into a template like this. You know, our strategy is blah, we'll lead a blah effort of the market for our use of blah and blah to build a blah. And you could just generate these things. So here's one, our strategy is customer focused. We'll leave a disruptive effort of the market for our use of innovative social media and big data to build a collaborative cloud-based ecosystem. That sounds brilliant, doesn't it? I'd sign that one off. What about our strategies? Innovative digital business. We're all up for that, aren't we? Are we going to lead a growth effort of the market for our use of customer-focused competitive advantage and just, fantastic collaborative revolution? Except, of course, it's just nonsense. Okay, from beginning to end, it's just claptrap. And in fact, this friend of mine, Simon Wardley, at the bottom here, was so taken by this that he got somebody to actually build. And this is we'll share these slides afterwards. But this is a website you can go to, and you click a button, and it will build you randomly generated digital strategies using all these buzzwords because they're totally meaningless. And that's a problem. That's a problem for us because it obscures actually our willingness to have some of those serious conversations. We go, yeah, I know all about digital transformation. And actually, usually we're not talking about that, are we? We're just talking about maybe a software upgrade or changing to Microsoft 365. We're not really talking about what on earth we're trying to achieve. So I'm going to try quickly and make 3 contributions. Not try and get across too much, but try and get across some, hopefully some kind of big ideas. The first one is we're used to talking about legacy, aren't we? And I'm going to unpack what I believe a legacy organization means, and particularly for local government, and what that means for everybody on this call, hopefully. Having done that, we're then going to have a brief look into the future and go, okay, what on earth is this emerging cloud-based digital infrastructure? And what does that mean for people who work in the public sector, and particularly in local government? And then finally, I'm going to leave you with 2 simple challenges for going back and thinking about the future of where you work. So getting straight into it then, legacy organization. Kind of what do we mean by that? Well, I'm very keen on this book. I'm not on commission or anything, but this guy Max Tegmark he's a sort of polymath who lives in the States. He's a nuclear physicist, and he writes about artificial intelligence and everything. And I was very taken by a particular map in this book, and it's here. You can see here. This is like and this is just a photograph of my own book, my own copy. You can see a topography here. You've got some hills and you've got some oceans in there. And what he's trying to talk about really is that as artificial intelligence speeds up, as process automation and machine learning starts to take over, we're going to start to see more and more and more, of course, of our jobs go underwater and become submerged. So if there are 10 million professional truck drivers in the United States who are going to be out without a job in 10 years' time. That's a serious social issue right there. And obviously that shows you that unless you're basically a comedian, you're an artist or a cinematographer, your jobs are likely to become automated. Now, that's a real problem for so-called legacy organizations, because, of course, legacy organizations, of which everybody here is one, right, grew all of their people, processes, and tech before the arrival of the modern internet. What's the modern internet? It's basically the plumbing, the pipes that connect us all together now. In the last century, we couldn't share stuff. We couldn't share data, and we couldn't share capabilities, common things together. So we had to build them all ourselves. So it's not our fault. We're not idiots that we're stuck like this. But the new century means, and in particular, the maturing of the internet in the last 10, 15 years means now we are increasingly challenged not to reinvent the wheel again and again and again. We can share stuff. So legacy organizations are organizations that grew up in the last century and have all the wrong configurations of people, process, and tech. They live in silos, as we'll see a bit later. So that's a problem, isn't it? I kind of ask, well, with the explosion of cloud-based utilities and services, so for the last 10 years, the cloud was all about, well, let's get on the cloud, let's store our data in the cloud, we might make some cost savings, might have some security advantages. The next 10 years, of course, is going to be what we do with our data in the cloud, because that's where all the exciting stuff lives. The artificial intelligence, the machine learning, the natural language processing, the optical character recognition, the geolocation services, the advanced analytics, it's all in the cloud. So your data has to be in the cloud, and increasingly a lot of the applications that run your business are in the cloud as well. But are we ignoring that stuff? What are we bequeathing to the people who are coming after us in 5, 10, 15 years time maybe? And are we really just sticking our heads kind of in the sand here? Because I think in many ways, local services are strikingly dysfunctional. We're not really thinking about that responsibility we've got. And it's not just, and I'm going to use a UK example here, but it's an exact analogy to over in Australia. It's not just local authorities, right? So in the UK, we've got 430 local government organisations. Each one, though, is surrounded by health, social care, police, ambulance, third sector, and housing. And at their back end, they all do the same thing again and again and again. They make and receive payments. They do case management. They do workflow. They do licensing. They do registration. All of those things and a host of other capabilities, functions, and they reinvent them slightly differently and pay suppliers for slightly different versions of that stuff, and then get stuck into all the software upgrade paths and the rest of it. We've got almost 170,000 charities at their back end. They do all that stuff too. Thousands of social housing. We've got so much money in our National Health Service, our beloved holy NHS in this country. It's washing out the sides. The problem is about 30% of the overall budget doesn't touch a doctor or a nurse. It just goes on boring management, administrative, standardizable nonsense. I told you you'd get some views in this talk, right? Same with our 43 police forces, and same with the 143 universities.
What does day 2 look like?
I don't know if you can guess who this is. He's just sent a large rocket in the sky with William Shatner.
Day 2 is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And that is why it is always day 1.
That, of course, is Jeff Bezos, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, and day 1 is the idea that every single day you wake up and you're using the best emerging and digital technology to configure your services around citizens. And day 1 means that you're asking yourself every day how their needs are changing, your customers are changing, and how you can reconfigure your organization to best serve them. In the public sector, we cannot have day 2, if you like, what Bezos would call day 2, except if you look across public sector, everywhere we're day 2, right? Day 2 organizations are organizations that over time just take their eye off the ball and become more obsessed with themselves and their internal organization, this stuff that you can tell is the enemy of me. So if this is a map of our public services, where are those flooded bits? Where are the day 2 areas where we're really taking our eye off the ball? Where are the day 2 areas, if you like, where with the rise of emerging technology, we have huge opportunities to do our duty as public servants and take advantage of that and leverage those so that we can push funds, precious funds and focus to the front line. So that's one challenge for you, is to look across your own organization and work out where the equivalent is of just paying chess or rote memorization or Jeopardy. Where in your organizations are you doing things which are really just reinventing the wheel and adding very little value to citizens? And to ask those questions, we have to start getting much more focused as business leaders on this. This is a kind of view of the way that we're organized, of course, collectively. So across local government organizations in Australia, you look a bit like that, okay? And internally, if you open up each of your organizations, you look a bit like that. And that's a problem, of course. So, you know, I told you we spend a lot. So that's a treasury figure saying we spend 15% of our entire budget on non-clinical stuff. But that's a treasury figure, right? So it's not true. You've got to double it. And similarly, universities like my own one. So basically, this is a piece saying that basically as full-time academic staff kind of stay pretty much constant, the number of administrative staff over the last 20, 30 years has gone up by about 3.5, which is equivalent of about £1,500 per Oxford student. Students don't have very much money to begin with. Where is the equivalent of that in local government? Okay, we have an administrative bloat, which is a bit like blockbuster video rather than Netflix, right? Our citizens want a Netflix video. They want us to use the internet intelligently to deliver our services differently, not just the same thing, not just to digitize analog services and put them in the cloud, to deliver them differently. But we're still delivering, I argue, a blockbuster government. So that's why it's broken. That's why we really have a lot of thinking to do. So what does commoditization and kind of a global commons have to do with this? Well, if you bought this Jaguar car, so in particular, if you're like me, you're a kind of a middle-aged male, I think that tends to be the target audience for most of these Jaguar cars. You bought a Jaguar car for a reason, right? You like the shiny paint, you like the leather upholstery inside and the growling noise of the engine when you get in, and there's a whole lot of value, right, that you're buying into when you buy your Jaguar car. Except Jaguar, of course, was owned by Ford at that point, and Ford realized that it was a bit silly to build every single mark of Jaguar up from the ground up, right? So to build all the stuff that you can't see, like the little wire that connects the speedometer to the engine, right? Do you really care who made that stuff? Of course you don't. Do you really care who made the brake calipers, providing they work against some standard service level agreements? So actually, this was basically a Ford, and the bits that you didn't see were Ford parts. Renault and Nissan have done the same thing, right? We compete on the forecourt to sell your different cars, but we actually share many of the common parts, which is an extraordinary thing to do, isn't it? And that means, of course, by not wasting time building everything from the ground up every time in silos, they can get new products to market quicker. They can reuse stuff, so it's much cheaper, right? They can offer more consumer choice because they can configure standardized parts around what customers want, right? So which bits do you want on your car? What color do you want it? Which kind of seats? They're configurable. They're like Lego bricks. Now that was really great until, of course, a motoring journalist took out this car and actually realized, got in the car, and looked at these switches in the front and went, hang on a second, unfortunately for Ford, I had just tested a Ford Focus the preceding week, and I recognized some of these switches were in the Ford Focus. So he blew the whistle and there was a bit of a fuss. Actually, I argue that that was effective management because, of course, Ford then learned that the line between what I call focus, where you add value, you're doing stuff that, in your case, your citizens care about, and leverage, which is stuff they don't care about, but you're probably wasting money on, that little line was just a little bit higher. In other words, it was not a good idea to share switchgear because actually their customers cared about that. So in terms of your strategy, digital strategy, increasingly it's about understanding where you add value to citizens in the digital era, whereas where you should be sharing, reusing, and becoming much, much more modular, okay? And just so you don't think I'm making this up, or Ford and Jaguar are making this up, or Renault and Nissan, or Rolls-Royce aero engines, or HP printers, or any of the other examples I could give you about modern management in the internet era, check out Amazon. In case you thought the Amazon Echo was something that just called Alexa sort of sat on your desk as a smart speaker, it's not. It's software. And this is the begging site where Amazon begs software developers to build in their free Echo and Alexa software into products such as cars, for example, that would never dream of building it themselves because all that stuff is out there in the cloud, ready to build in and turbocharge, enhance your own service offerings. This is Microsoft's similar begging site. Okay, so the MSDN, the developer network site, saying, guys, come and build our Microsoft software. Here's some free documentation, code libraries, APIs, actual code, training, because we're desperate, because we recognize the world is separating into people who just focus on where they add value and increasingly build software in the cloud into the back end to turbocharge what they're doing, save money, and configure what they're doing. Okay, now if you think about that, 20 years ago, 10 years ago even, Microsoft basically sold shrink wrap software on CDs to people. Microsoft now see themselves as an online platform. So they're changing. And this is an example of how this produces fantastic digital service design. So this is TransferWise, a digital startup. It's a currency exchange, as you can see. So I'm over here in the UK. I can type in, if I send £1,000 to me at my end, then you're going to get 1,139 of well, euros in this case. The point is, if you look at competitors, they don't offer that. That's really configured around my user needs, isn't it? It's lovely, simple front-end user design. And I can even compare the price, okay, of what you're offering me with actually what I would get for competitors. Now, that's a beautiful piece of front-end, simple, user-centric digital service design. Except, of course, TransferWise wasn't stupid enough to try and build their service from the ground up. Because if you then look underneath the hood, you can see TransferWise is powered, turbocharged, if you like, by Currency Cloud, which, as you can read there, it's a white label payments platform using APIs to give a complete out-the-box payment solution. So, and this is the lesson for local government, TransferWise is saying, we're just going to focus on that bit where we add value to our customers. And they don't care about what powers the back end any more than your customers ask searching questions about, I don't know, the software upgrade path of your customer relationship management system, or the, I don't know, the web services platform that powers your line of business applications that schedules green bin waste collection, right? They don't care about that stuff. So why are you duplicating it again and again? That's not your fault, as I've said. We're all legacy organizations. Any more than it's Western Union's fault that competes with Currency Cloud, because they're a 100-year-old organization. And if we look at their digital offering, you can see I can send money or I can register. I can't do anything else. I can't compare. I can't see what you're going to get. It's just bad design, and they are hampered in the same way local government is, because of course they're arranged in those kinds of silos. Similar thing, another modern. So I don't know if you have Rightmove over in Australia, but it's the #1 property website over here. It's just taken over. But of course, again, building a property website, you wouldn't dream of building it all yourself now. You have your property agents uploading stuff on videos on the phones and details, but all the rest of it, right? The data platform, the content management piece, the website, all of the kind of geolocation services and the rest of it, you just consume. You don't build it yourself. So in summary, the strategic take home for digital strategy in the digital era, I ask, here's a piece I did in Computer Weekly over here, is about focus and leverage. Imagine you're in a dragon's den scenario, okay? So you're pitching an idea to me and I'm sitting on my pile of cash here. And I could be a minister as easily as, I don't know, an investor or a business angel. How do I tell whether your idea is any good in the digital era or not? Well, in the last century, it would be, again, about whether I liked you and whether I think you've done your market research and all about your focus. And if I thought your focus was compelling enough, I might give you the money. It's all changed, ladies and gents. It's all changed, because in the 21st century, okay, I don't just want to hear about your focus, how you propose to spend my money or my taxpayers' money. I want to hear about leverage. In other words, how you propose to turbocharge, just like the few examples I shared with you, your idea, right, your offering, using the emerging digital economy and this incredibly powerful flywheel of apps and services which are out there in the cloud. And in turn, right, that not only stops me burning through my pile of cash, reinventing the wheel before we get to that little point where we actually add some value, but in turn, it enables you to rethink your focus, what you're proposing to do in the first place. So in government, for example, we are too often digitizing old services where we have to apply in a clunky way to government for something which really government ought to know about us to begin with, right? And make it easy and send us an SMS and say, do you want to renew this license or whatever it might be? So by considering at the same time what we're focusing on and what is out there to enable us to effectively eliminate demand failure, right? We can actually change the focus itself, deliver a better service, much more quicker, much cheaper, much more sustainably. To the point where, okay, this is a fake bill. This is a fake parliamentary bill, which did quite well on social media. I launched it last year, and I had all sorts of people in government bringing up going, Mark, my team haven't seen this bill. We need to be all over it. Can you send us a copy? I don't know how easily you can see it down there, but it's called Localism in the Digital Economy Bill. Right? Because of course here in our local services, we all hide behind something called localism and place. And localism and place, whilst being right politically, is often a fig leaf, if you like, for people to say, we're special here. We don't consume standardized stuff because we've got to build everything for our citizens one by one. Okay, the point is, however, that that's a total misunderstanding of the opportunity here, because now the opportunity is, instead of vending machine government where you can select from one of 3 clunky legacy options, if you standardize the back end of stuff, you can reconfigure in myriad unbelievable ways and flexible and powerful ways around citizens. So what I said here, if you look at point 2, is, and in language so simple that even our parliamentary MPs can understand it, since 2011, the acceleration, proliferation, maturing of the digital economy means loads of powerful new services can be consumed from the cloud cheaply and at scale. And if we consume them like utilities, like electricity or water, public authorities can center around citizens rather than silos, shift resources to the front line, share data, upgrade automatically, and of course, innovate and crowdsource. And it says these are now of such value that we're going to redefine at the center what you, chief executives, have control over. And effectively, we're going to have an envelope of stuff every year that we're going to update, and we're going to say, you know what, we're either going to run it centrally or we're going to specify it centrally so you guys can all come together around that. Similarly, I had a hand in writing quite a recent government transformation strategy here in the UK. And here's the piece that I did. I'm not going to read it. It's all about developing new common capabilities and components. And again, collectively as local services in Australia, as everywhere else, how can you come together to start to collaborate and develop and publish common capabilities and components? We mentioned the Scottish Government, and this is very, very relevant to local services as well. So again, a piece I wrote in Government Information Quarterly has had a bit of an impact there, because this is a recent Scottish Government procurement, okay, a public procurement, and I won't read it all, but you can see they're saying we've all got some stuff in common, like booking appointments, receiving funds, making payments, all that kind of stuff. So can we create and share standardized practical ways for delivering them and share them together? And we did a quick study showing how many agencies in Scotland do licensing and registration. You could ask yourselves the same question, I would imagine, right? Done in tens of thousands of different ways across Scotland. And we discovered they all basically follow the same hidden shared service pattern. You can see discovery. Do I need permission to do something? Where do I get it from? Am I eligible? Okay, I might be eligible, but are you going to give it to me? And finally, where do I get it from? And underpinning those to enable those things to happen are a bunch of Lego bricks, okay? Making payments, taking payments, an open access register, report something, track something. And this stuff can be consumed in a standard way by all of you, not immediately, because business change takes a while. You can't turn a super tanker around overnight, right? But certainly you can start to get there, because then, and those things are now repeated along the left-hand side here, book an appointment, make a payment, validate benefits. You then start to look across all of your silos on the right of this slide, in this case, justice, natural heritage, environment, and start to spot how you can reuse those common capabilities across public services. Here's an example that really kind of, this actually got me into our health secretary, Matt Hancock, before he got fired. So this got me 2 hours with him about rejuvenating the National Health Service, okay? I said, look, Heart FM is a middle of the road kind of radio station. As can you see from this slide, there are lots of regional Heart FMs, Devon and Bristol and Berkshire and Hampshire. The thing is, Heart FM has local DJs, local advertisers, local revenue models, local traffic, local news, local weather, local stuff for local people. Except, of course, nobody at Heart FM is silly enough to think that we listeners care about the CRM system, right? Or the back office, which is all streamed somewhere from some central location in who cares, right? Certainly not people in Heart FM. So Heart FM have moved effectively, or actually as a modern organization, they didn't have to move. You have to move from something that looks like this, and they've really thought about this. So this is basically separates how the work that everybody here on this call has to do in moving from this to this. Levers and dials, easy bit. That's websites and call centers and that kind of SMS and social media and stuff. And machinery, easy bit, right? That's the cloud, that's the electricity stuff, that's your pipes, your wires, your infrastructure. Here we call this gubbins, which is why I like this screenshot from this video. Gubbins, a British slang word, just going stuff. right? And those are the bits I've been talking about. Where are the bits where you add specific value, where you need to build things, okay, and configure them? Whereas, where are the common things which really are examples of where you're just reinventing the wheel again and again and again? And it's those red bits that, in order to be able to configure at the front end, you've really got to, we all have to really start to kind of focus on in terms of how we actually improve. And here's an example of how that happened for me. I'm talking to you from a local authority in Tewkesbury. We're a very small local authority. We have very little money. And my leader, my politician in charge of technology, sat me down. He happens to be a neighbour about 4 years ago, and he sat me down for a couple of pints in the pub, and he went, "Mark, we've just been quoted £100,000 by a big consulting firm to redo our website. Is that good? Should we be paying £5,000 or should we be paying £500,000? I don't know." And I took him through this thinking using a mapping technique, just resolutely saying, are we adding value? Does our website do things that we need to pay for and bespoke, or can we go vanilla? And will our citizens care? And as a result of that, you can see here, we pay £150 a year for our website, which as a council taxpayer and a citizen, I'm pretty pleased about. So just before I finish, just to get really kind of down and dirty here and detailed, you can see these are the sorts of things I'm talking about. These are the sorts of functions. Local authority really is all about transactions between people, places, and organizations. Those are the three types of data that your back-end stuff manipulates. And if you can start to use these kind of turbocharged Lego bricks, if you like, to manipulate that better, you can deliver better services. So to give you a real example of this in my own experience, which I think is pretty powerful, and I'm still really proud of it, in our organization, we work for Swindon Borough Council. Swindon, like all of you, I'm sure, has a problem with fly tipping, we call it here. So people dumping waste at the side of the road. The problem about fly tipping is very expensive because you've got to separate out the different types of waste, right? So it might be a mattress from metal, from hospital waste, from white goods, from garden waste, etc. So we actually use some very simple cloud-based technology very cheaply. And we said, what do we want to do? What's the user need? Okay, so deal with these incidents. And we don't obviously know in many cases where the stuff is and what the stuff is. So what do we need to do? What are the capabilities, right? We didn't build something from scratch and rush off and say, let's build something. We said, what are the Lego bricks that we need, right? And we thought, okay, we need some optical character recognition and some, I won't read those things to you. But what we effectively did, our teams did, is we thought, aha, we've got some council assets which are going around all the time, buses and bin lorries, okay, waste lorries. They're going around all the time. So let's get some very mega cheap cameras, like £15 digital cameras. We'll strap them on these council assets and they will go around and they're going to upload feed of the roadside, I'll show you in a second, all the time, okay? And then we're going to pump it all in the cloud, okay, through these things. Optical character recognition, that enables obviously the computer to kind of distinguish between pixels on an image. Natural language processing to read street signs and other clues, right, and brand names and stuff. Geolocation services, where is this thing that we're looking at? Machine learning, which then starts to distinguish and learn. Ah, that looks like some white goods. That looks like some hospital waste, okay? And then finally, web services, which connects it into the back end of the council systems. And as a result, we built something that basically won the AI Digital Innovation of the Year Public Sector UK Award, because what happens, of course, is these lorries go around, they upload that stuff, and automatically, again, instantly at the back end, the council is building collection rosters against different types of waste. And so when it's got, I don't know, the amount of, maybe it's a standard amount of 15 fridges or freezers, it's then going to dispatch the contractor to go and pick up those white goods. When there's a whole bunch of hospital waste, it's going to dispatch another contractor to the right locations to pick up those goods. And as you can see, we then repurposed it for doing potholes. We then repurposed it in COVID again, that common service pattern with those common Lego bricks, the use case, to basically enable people who are shielding vulnerable people in COVID. Similar thing. Where are some people or things out there? What do we need to know about them? And how can we dispatch and analyze who to dispatch and go and see them? So we enabled basically by data trust people who are shielding to share data about themselves without exposing it to everybody, so that certain people could then go and see them and find out if they're okay. And I said we won the AI Innovation of the Year. The exciting thing about this is this cost just a handful of thousands of pounds and was delivered in a matter of 2 or 3 months. That's the kind of power of this technology, about thinking about Lego rather than repurposing, carrying on the way that we are. So just to summarize, this is the end here, you'll be glad to hear. The collective prize for the next generation, I think, is thinking about that gubbins and that machinery, and how can we, where do we not add value by replicating that stuff? How can we start collectively to share together, okay? And I think that's a chief executive responsibility. It's not for just saying, that's my chief data officer or my CTO, I'm going to be on the golf course in 5 years, so I won't bother shaking this stuff up, okay? Maximize your use of cloud-based utilities, minimize bespoking everything, okay? And build that culture of challenge to really shake up and change the way that we do things. It's okay to do that. I think there's one slide I might have passed over quickly, which I'll just mention here. We have something called the Local Digital Declaration here in the UK that I had something to do with. And it's basically, if you can look it up, it's on gov.uk, Local Digital Declaration. It's a bunch of councils who came together saying, you know what, we get this stuff, and we're going to have this declaration that says we're going to start to share. We're saying publicly to everyone, we're going to share code libraries, GitHub repositories, architecture diagrams, business cases. We're going to start to share wherever possible and start to collectively converge over the next 5, 10, 15 years' time. That's something maybe to throw out for everyone on this call, is something you could practically do together with or without the central support of your department, which again, at this end, we're working on as well. So final slide, are you just caretaking the existing model and basically letting down the next generation? Because this stuff out there, I've given you a few examples of businesses, but of course, you know I'm telling the truth, because you're consumers who use the emerging economy, whether it's in travel or retail or newspapers, right? You know what's happening out there. Are we sleeping at the wheel, or are we helping the next generation? And then finally, if you want to help, are you having the right conversations with citizens, politicians, officers and partners? Yes, it's about the tech, but fundamentally, really, it's about what business we're in the emerging digital economy and whether or not we're going to carry on adding value. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Mark. That was fascinating and thought-provoking. Extrapolating from your example of the Jaguar using the Ford car components, you went on to say that the local government digital challenge is to focus on where they add value and to share everything else being the back end. How is that digital challenge, or that take up of digital technology, different from shared services, which had, well, we'll put all our IT, we'll share our IT, we'll share our finance departments, etc., etc.
That's a great question, John. And that's a very common question. It's really important that you ask that, because it does sound a little bit like shared services, doesn't it? And if we're trying to explain this thinking to members, for example, they might say, we've had shared services since the 70s, right? So what's new? Shared services has got something of a checkered career, I think, and I understand in Australia as well as in the UK and elsewhere. And one of the biggest reasons for that is, of course, you and I might be vigorously in favour of shared services, right? Providing, of course, you share my service, right? Because I want your people to be fired rather than my people. And actually, if we look deeper, we then understand that we're not doing any of what I just talked about. Really, all we're doing is we are both fixating on one legacy organization's kind of spaghetti of people, processes, and technology with all of its legacy problems. And we're just sharing that. And that just falls further and further and further behind the rest of the world and what's going on in the digital economy. So whereas, yes, there's some sharing going on, but what we are talking about here, of course, is sharing that understanding, if you like, the business architecture, the business model of where are those common capabilities, and can we standardize, can we enforce rigorous standards for those capabilities to make them simpler and easier to reuse, to commoditize and to make them cheaper. And then, of course, we can individually as councils, we can configure some of those capabilities. So exactly like the way I showed you with Swindon, okay, we could never have delivered that out of a shared service model, right? Because we could have gone to the neighbouring council and said, right, how can you help us here? And then they'd gone, well, I don't know, this is our old SLA that we did in 1986, right? Yeah, have that. So I think by sharing, by breaking things up and looking at those standardized capabilities and saying, we're gonna build our own local services, but from these common Lego bricks, you then start to really get that benefit between localism and local variation that's right for the people in the area that you live. And you achieve that, if you like, by standardizing that back end. And those standards can be, so I'm not saying that we all have to choose one technology and run it off that technology. Now, you could do that as a stepping stone, right? It probably would be better to do that, actually, than where most councils are at the moment. But where you want to get to, of course, is to break up some of those capabilities so that you can start to reuse in the way that I explained.
Thank you, Mark. Vogel.
Very quickly, Mark, I've tried to put together a very quick poll here around the local government declaration. So I'm going to launch it out there to the community just to see what the interest might be to get something similar started here. Hopefully people can see that. Can you, while people are answering that, can you just give us a little bit of context around it? You know, why is it important?
So
what has it achieved? All that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I apologize for not flicking up the slide. I think there was a slight lag on the slides, which is why it flicked backwards and forwards a bit today. So if you go on to gov.uk, or you just Google local digital declaration gov.uk, it'll come up for you. And there basically, it started off with about 5 or 6 councils. It's now about 35 different councils now. It was a CTO-driven initiative, so it's driven from inside the public sector. And I was actually at the meeting, the first inaugural meeting of the first 5, where we kind of got together in London, and it was really about, okay, what practically can we start to share? So in reality, what it is it's a GitHub repository at the back end, okay? So, and it enables you to share almost anything that you think might be useful. And the thinking behind it, okay, is look, let's send that signal to the market. So look, if John, Fergal and I all know that we're coming up for renewal, and I don't know why I keep picking on CRMs, but it could be a content management platform. And we know that's coming up for renewal individually from our individual systems in the next 5 years. We're going to start to share that information now. And we're going to start to see, actually, if we can, not necessarily a joint procurement, you can do what you like here, obviously, but you can start to share specs. You can start to share, a lot of the kind of the architecture information or the user needs. And you can start to then learn from each other and go, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. We should incorporate that into ours. And then suddenly you've got actually a requirement spec that's starting to look quite similar. And then, of course, you can beat up your suppliers and say, don't sell us slightly different versions of the same thing, right? And actually, because we're having vanilla here rather than Raspberry Ripple, then actually we're going to have some price kind of cuts as well there. But most importantly, of course, the legacy of doing that, the effect of doing that, isn't the technology that you might end up sharing. It's that your business processes, your business operations, your service patterns, or the logical design, if you like, of your 2-3 councils start to become the same. And that enables you to be very powerful going forwards. So it's really that logical, the footprint of this is logically you start doing things and behaving in the back end in the same way. And that gives you collectively power over everything from data sharing, obviously, to shaping the market you're with, to just, quite frankly, saving time and money and cost on whether it's process diagrams or business cases and of course, in so doing, you start to build that culture of sharing and actually thinking, okay, I do work in one local authority, but I do understand actually that it's nonsense for all local authorities. They're all public organizations, and yet we often behave as if we're competitors in a private sector market. We're all state organizations who do the same thing. And if you look at those industries which are most suitable for digital transformation, they're all, it's not in our case Whitehall central government, it's local. It's every time you've got lots of organizations who are doing slightly similar versions of the same thing. If you think in the private sector, it's the same thing. So digital plays are when we all start to go, wow, okay, the internet does enable us to start to share all of that stuff at the back end and innovate. And that's where you can get the most bang for buck.
Right, well, look, I'll end the poll. We've got an interest. I think 76 people who are yes would be in favour of doing something here, which maybe we can take the lead on and see if we can get a local digital declaration going. We've got 5% to say no and 19% who are unsure, which is interesting in and of itself. I'll just I've a question here from Lorraine Ty. Hi, Lorraine. She wants to ask you, what do you see as the barriers to implementing this approach and suggestions for addressing those barriers? You've probably talked a little bit about change, but any war stories that you can share with us to,
Yeah, I mean, so of course there are lots of barriers, and I said at the beginning, I don't have all the answers, and if it was as easy as that, we'd all be there already, wouldn't we? It is very hard. Of course it's hard, and of course, as ever, and increasingly now, it's not the technology, right? I think we're all culturally sort of trained to think, oh, the technology is very difficult and the people is easy. Of course, it's the reverse of that. It's people. These are people's jobs we're talking about. You know, the people the teams that rarely, if ever, survive digital transformation, ironically, are of course the security teams. Why? Because security teams have one KPI in their job, basically, and that's to say no. It's to explain to you why whatever you want to do is going to break security protocols and therefore why you can't do it. And they are genuinely, in my experience, the people who probably don't survive most radical digital transformation programs. So culturally, it's very hard. You are telling all sorts of people that the things that they cherish, the things that they've grown up doing, are a bad idea or now of less value than they were before. And that's a problem, of course, with public sector unions. That's also an issue that we've got. And, you know, you can be accused sometimes of attacking public services. And actually, of course, it's not attacking public services. It's actually saying, you know, certainly over here, our councils are running out of money, right? We just cannot carry on the same way. And I'm sure you've got the same problems at the front end as well. This is saving public services by undertaking a structural reconfiguration for the 21st century, because otherwise we're just all going, we're going down. So this isn't, it's about building the business understanding and ownership. And the most important thing, because we could talk about the barriers and how to overcome them in a whole session, but I guess the one thing to focus on is business sponsorship. So the work I did with the UK government a few years ago got somewhere because we had a cabinet minister who stood behind us and was a vocal sponsor of what was going on. And if you don't get the buy-in, the understanding and the sponsorship from the business, then this will just be a technology issue and you won't get the power to actually drive some of this stuff through. So I passionately believe that to get this is a systemic issue, as we can see. Not one council can solve this by itself. This is about coming together, and to do that, it really, really helps to have some proper leadership from the centre, as well as then the bottom-up collaboration in something like a local digital declaration. If you get those two together, the alignment of the stars and the planets, then you could really make some difference. But it's about education, not technology training. It's about investing the time in educating the leaders on what the way out is. Why, looking at the private sector and saying, okay, when we go shopping or when we go on holiday, we take this stuff for granted. So why, when we interact with the state, is it like going back to the 1970s? And what does that mean for what we think we need to be doing in our jobs as leaders, not as techies, as leaders every day? So if we can start to get that right and get the buy-in, the sponsorship, then we can start to drive the culture change. And of course, our citizens will start to enjoy this stuff, right? So when they start to see these kind of things happening, they're going to get that kind of that positive feedback as well. So again, as ever, in implementation, it's avoiding big bang. It's avoiding the big macho, old-fashioned, right, we're going to have a massive transformation program, and it's going to cost us £100 million or dollars, and then bang, it's all going to be different. And of course, it's going to be a disaster. So it's about doing it little by little, dropping some stuff, gets the positive feedback, gets you noticed, starts to build credibility, prompts some more questions. It's that way, and working collectively.
I'll read a couple of comments, John. You may have another question. I don't know if these are comments or questions, but one from Colin Fairweather. Seems to me that current leadership in local government aren't rewarded for transformational change, rather for incremental change. Question from where will change come? You can take that. and I'll keep going.
So, well, I think we were kind of speaking to that a little bit earlier, right? So no, of course the reward structures aren't right, but neither are, as I said, with my example of the security team, the reward structures aren't right going all the way down the system, right? So how do we do that? And again, part of that is cultural, I think. I mean, people take their incentive cues from the system that's set by the leaders. And without that endorsement and vigorous endorsement, by the way, then it's never going to work. And this is why this is a social conversation we have to have, frankly, globally about public services. We have this cozy 1970s idea that in public services we're all angels, right? We're special, and we work for the people, and we're very different from those people in the private sector, and we won't work with them. And of course, what's happening out there is, the business school thing would say that's nonsense, right? Because as we just showed, with the examples of the Alexa code or the Microsoft code, or what's happening is these are becoming more and more blended as because there's a whole bunch of stuff in the cloud, and our services are becoming blended with Lego bricks from public, private, and third sector. So that kind of cozy, we're different, we're special, this doesn't apply to us, we have different reward structures, is frankly old-fashioned. But we are over here not quite ready as a society for some of those national conversations, right? I mean, this is where it's going. But so it's culture and it's leadership once again.
Comment from Paul O'Dwyer. Mark, with the Swindon example, a comment is that part of the innovation is the design thinking up front, going back to looking at the problem from first principles and thinking about this. Some of the tools already out there, in this case, the trucks scooting around the locality, and how they can be used to solve the problem with tech.
Absolutely right, and it is, and I didn't have time to get into the whole agile piece, but that was done in a kind of super agile set of iterations. But you saw the kind of clue to that in the slide. It said, "What's the user need?" And then it said, "What capabilities?" So forget the existing process. It didn't say, "Right, let's what's our legacy process for collecting waste?" Because we'd have never got anywhere. It says, "Forget that. Today, it's a good thing maybe, but we're going to forget it today. We're going to say, what's the user need?" And we focused on the user need, and then said, where are those capabilities going to come from? And we listed them. And that's before we went to then, how to look around at products and what was out there to do it. And we might have killed it, right? So if the stuff wasn't out there, or it wasn't cheap, or it was difficult, we might have killed it right there. So you're absolutely right. It was done using a very, very iterative kind of agile approach, which effectively ignores the way things are done now, because again, that's obsessing with ourself, isn't it? It's not actually obsessing about the users, and says, what's the service pattern here? And the exciting thing, just to finish, was of course, I then showed you how we reused the same service pattern to deliver 2 or 3 other user needs very, very rapidly that had an impact that citizens appreciated.
Right, I'll keep going. The UK had a body called Efficiency and Reform Group. This is from Mark W., part of the Premier and Cabinet. It looked to transform the way public services are delivered. Why did it close?
Right. So I was part of the Efficiency and Reform Group, so I can kind of I can give you chapter and verse on that, but I'll give you the high-level version. So there were a bunch of us. We're about a team of about 8 to 10 people who briefly, between 2010 and 2012, got our levers on the hands of power. It was brilliant. So we enacted a bunch of things in the UK all around this thinking. So spend controls, G-Cloud, which is the kind of commoditized marketplace to try and standardize stuff, open standards, open data policy. We called the big systems integrators an oligopoly, a very rude word under a parliamentary review document, and we tried to open up the market to SMEs and all that kind of stuff. It then led to the formation of Government Digital Service in 2012-13, and so then you start getting into opinions. So my opinion is very straightforward. GDS did lots of good things. It had a very good high profile, won lots of design awards. It was run by somebody, Mike Bracken, who's very good at all sorts of stuff, but he's a digital marketing person who came from the BBC, and he brought with him, in my opinion, a focus on product building. So GDS became more about building product in fantastic agile ways. And then what happened is lots of people looked at GDS, and because it was very well marketed, very well designed, they said, right, what we need to do to be digital is to build a team a bit like GDS in our local authorities and build lots of product using agile techniques. I'm giving you a kind of an extreme, a kind of straw man view here. Whereas So I think what I would say is it didn't die. That standards group became the government CTO, a chap called Liam Maxwell, who I know very well, and then tried to keep that going inside GDS. So they tried doing something called Common Technology Services, I think, which was all about identifying common stuff across the government, standardizing it and helping to share it. But the emphasis wasn't there. And so that emphasis just faded away over time. And GDS became more of an internal product shop inside government. That's my critique of what happened inside GDS. And I think it's just a shift in emphasis, but it kind of moved in that direction.
We've got 5 minutes left. We'll go for 3, and then John, we'll give a vote of thanks for Mark. But let me see what I can pick out. I've got one from Darren Sutton here. Where around the world, in your opinion, are we seeing best practice in adoption beyond the UK? Is Estonia leveraging this approach? What kind of leadership is required to embrace this?
Yeah, so listen, so again, that's a session we could have a whole. Fun enough, I've just published a paper last week on this, which I can share and we can share afterwards, which compares different strategies across the world. You immediately, of course, get into politics, right? So on the one hand, I would say China is one of the most sophisticated states to do this, right? But we wouldn't necessarily agree in many Western democracies with some of the data implications of that for citizens, right? But China is fantastically effective at harnessing relationships with big private sector platforms to share data, actually, and bring about what it would argue would be great results for citizens, right? So it's quite hard to compare and contrast. We're comparing apples and pears here. Estonia, absolutely. Estonia, I think, many people believe that Estonia did this stuff. They built something called Crossroad, which is surprisingly effective. And there's videos out there that will show you that Estonia has had a simple digital identity system for like 10 years. You can do most of your stuff online, simply, cheaply, easily, and you've been able to do it for years. And they did it. So the story goes, because they were terrified of being invaded by Russia, and they want to be able to reconstitute the state in the event of an invasion out of the cloud at a moment's notice. So they really had a national driver to push digital governments kind of further than anybody else. But there are all sorts of great. Best thing is, rather than get into this now, I will share the paper and do take a look, because but I think that it's horses for courses, because of course privacy starts. You can do a whole lot of stuff, right? If the state's super powerful and you just go ahead and do it, because then we can actually, we can do all sorts of things. In the UK, we're so obsessed by not having a national ID card that has arguably held us back, actually, in terms of single sign-on for a long time. So it kind of depends, different issues to cope with for different jurisdictions.
Final question, 30 seconds, because Danielle has asked the last question. I don't want to leave her all alone. Thanks for a great presentation. Interested in your perspective on how we drive digital standardization in a context where local members are interested in physical place making, not digital place making. 30 seconds, Mark.
Yeah, so it's a great theme to end on, because of course, underlying everything I've said today is this tension between this idea that you can, in the digital era, in going forwards, you can deliver against place and locally far better by standardizing over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, going on that journey collectively to standardize and reuse the back end. And it's explaining and getting that over to people who, whose knee-jerk reaction will be, we're special here, let's just build everything for our own citizens, how wrong they are in this century. In the last century, they'd have been right, but we've just got to bring them up to speed. So it's that tension between the local and the global at the back end, which is going to get us to deliver citizen-centric public services for the future. So I'm really glad you picked that up.
Wonderful. I'll hand you over to John to do the final formalities.
Thank you, Fergal. Well, Mark, on behalf of Symphony 3 and all of us everyone who joined this webinar this afternoon, or this evening here in Australia, thank you very much for your time. You certainly did deliver on a thought-provoking and challenging presentation. In particular, your articulation of what the local government digital challenge is, i.e. to focus on where we add value to our customers. And that leaves me feeling very positive about digital technology, because my experience of local government here in Victoria is that it's full of women and men who are very dedicated and passionate about what they do. And the only people who survive in local government long term are those who have a real passion for serving their communities and adding value. And in that context, digital technology is an aid. It's a tool that can help everyone in local government do what they're passionate and committed to doing, i.e. serving their local communities better. So, Mark, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much. It's been
Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm going to go and have my breakfast now, my marmalade on toast.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, everybody.